In a city where dreams are built and shattered daily, one man's stand against injustice ignites a firestorm that will shake New York to its core. Tyler Johnson, a young black student celebrating his 21st birthday, never imagined that a simple night out would thrust him into the heart of a sinister conspiracy, threatening the very soul of the Big Apple. As he uncovers layers of corruption, discrimination, and greed, Tyler must confront not only the powerful forces arrayed against him, but also his own fears and doubts. In a world where truth comes at a deadly price, will Tyler's voice be silenced, or will it become the catalyst for a revolution that transforms a city and inspires a nation? The bustling streets of New York City pulsed with energy as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Among the sea of faces hurrying along the sidewalks, one stood out: Tyler Johnson, a tall, lanky African-American student with a determined glint in his dark brown eyes. Today was his 21st birthday, a milestone he had been looking forward to for years. Tyler adjusted his crisp white shirt and straightened his tie, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness as he approached Le Savoie, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. He had saved for months to afford this dinner with his closest friends, eager to celebrate not just his birthday but also his recent academic achievements at Columbia University's prestigious School of Journalism. As he pushed open the heavy oak doors, the rich aroma of gourmet cuisine and the soft tinkling of crystal glasses washed over him. The maitre d', a slim man with a pencil-thin mustache, raised an eyebrow as Tyler approached. "Good evening," Tyler said, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "Reservation for Johnson, party of 4. The maitre d' scanned the list, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded curtly. "This way, sir." As Tyler followed him through the dimly lit restaurant, he couldn't help but notice the curious glances from other diners. He was acutely aware that he was one of the few people of color in the establishment, but he pushed the thought aside, determined not to let it dampen his spirits. His friends Sarah, Mike, and Lisa were already seated at a corner table, their faces lighting up as they saw him approach. "Happy birthday, man," Mike exclaimed, standing up to give Tyler a bear hug. Sarah and Lisa joined in, enveloping Tyler in a group embrace that made him feel warm and appreciated. As they settled into their seats, Tyler couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Here he was, a young black man from Harlem, sitting in one of New York's finest restaurants, pursuing his dreams at an Ivy League university. It was moments like these that made all the hard work and sacrifices worth it. The waiter, a middle-aged man named Frank, approached their table with a forced smile. "Good evening," he said, his eyes darting between the 4 friends. "May I take your drink orders?" As they perused the wine list, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that Frank was paying more attention to his white friends than to him. When it came time to order, Frank seemed to barely acknowledge Tyler's presence. "I'll have the Chateau Margaux, please," Tyler said, pronouncing the French name flawlessly, a skill he'd picked up during a summer study abroad program in Paris. Frank's eyebrows shot up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he quickly composed himself. "Excellent choice, sir," he said, his tone noticeably more respectful. As the evening progressed, Tyler and his friends laughed, shared stories, and toasted to the future. The food was exquisite, flavors Tyler had only dreamed of experiencing. For a while, he forgot about the initial discomfort and lost himself in the joy of the moment. It wasn't until dessert that things took an unexpected turn. As Frank cleared their plates, his elbow accidentally knocked over Tyler's half-full glass of wine, spilling the deep red liquid across the pristine white tablecloth and onto Tyler's lap. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Lisa gasped, reaching for her napkin. Tyler stood up quickly, trying to minimize the damage to his clothes. "It's okay," he said, attempting to stay calm. "Accidents happen." Frank, however, seemed flustered and agitated. "Sir, you should have been more careful with your glass," he said, his voice tight. Tyler blinked in surprise. "Excuse me? But you were the one who dash." Before he could finish his sentence, the restaurant manager, a stocky man with graying hair and a permanent frown, appeared at their table. His name tag read Richard. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Frank quickly spoke up. "This gentleman," he said, gesturing towards Tyler, "knocked over his wine and is causing a disturbance." Tyler felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "That's not true," he said, struggling to keep his voice level. "Your waiter accidentally spilled the wine while clearing the table." Richard's frown deepened as he looked Tyler up and down. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We can't have you disrupting other diners' experiences." The restaurant had gone eerily quiet, other patrons watching the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Tyler felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the weight of being judged not by his character, but by the color of his skin. For a moment, Tyler was transported back to his childhood, remembering the countless times his father had sat him down and explained how the world might treat him differently because of his race. "But son," his father had always said, "never let their ignorance diminish your dignity." Taking a deep breath, Tyler straightened his back and looked Richard directly in the eye. "Sir," he began, his voice clear and confident, "I understand that you're doing your job, but I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I'm a paying customer, celebrating my 21st birthday with my friends. I've done nothing wrong, and I don't appreciate being accused of causing a disturbance when the only disturbance was an accident caused by your staff." Richard's face reddened, but Tyler continued, his words measured and articulate. "I would hope that in a city as diverse as New York, in a restaurant as prestigious as this, every customer would be treated with equal respect and dignity. If you have any security footage, I'm sure it will corroborate my version of events." The restaurant remained silent, everyone hanging on Tyler's every word. Even Richard seemed taken aback by Tyler's poise and eloquence. Furthermore, Tyler added, "I'm a journalism student at Columbia University. I'd be very interested in exploring why your establishment seems to have different standards of treatment for different customers. Perhaps that would make for an intriguing article in our university paper." As Tyler spoke, he noticed a middle-aged woman at a nearby table, discreetly pointing her phone in their direction. She gave Tyler a small nod of encouragement, and he realized she had been recording the entire exchange. Richard's demeanor suddenly changed. The anger in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of fear. I apologize for the misunderstanding," he stammered. "Of course you're welcome to stay. Let me comp your meals as a gesture of goodwill." Tyler shook his head. "That won't be necessary. We've finished our meal, and I think it's best if we leave now. But I hope this incident prompts some reflection on how you and your staff interact with all your customers." As Tyler and his friends gathered their things to leave, the other diners began to applaud. Some even stood up, offering words of support and admiration for Tyler's composure and articulation in the face of such blatant discrimination. Walking out of Le Sève, Tyler felt a mix of emotions: anger at the injustice, pride in standing up for himself, and a deep sadness that such incidents were still commonplace in 2024. Little did he know that this moment, captured on a stranger's phone, was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. As they stepped into the cool night air, Sarah squeezed Tyler's hand. "That was incredible," she said softly. "You handled that with so much grace." Tyler managed a small smile. "Thanks," he said. "I just hope it makes a difference." As they walked down the busy New York street, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was more than just a personal slight. It was a symptom of a larger, systemic issue, one that he, with his journalistic skills and newfound platform, might be uniquely positioned to address. Little did Tyler know, as he and his friends disappeared into the New York night, that this birthday dinner would be the catalyst for a journey that would not only change his life, but would also spark a movement that would touch hearts and challenge minds across the nation. The harsh buzz of Tyler's alarm clock pierced through his uneasy sleep. He groaned, reaching for his phone to silence the noise. As his eyes adjusted to the screen's brightness, he froze. His phone was flooded with notifications, hundreds of text messages, missed calls, and social media alerts. What the hell? Tyler muttered, sitting up in his cramped dorm room. He tapped on a message from his best friend, Mike. Dude, you're everywhere. Check Twitter now. With trembling fingers, Tyler opened the app. His eyes widened as he saw his own face staring back at him from countless posts. The video of last night's confrontation at Le Savoie had gone viral overnight. The clip, skillfully captured by the woman at the neighboring table, showed Tyler's dignified response to the manager's discrimination in crystal clear detail. It had been shared millions of times, with hashtags like #DiningWhileBlack and #TylerSpeaks trending nationwide. As Tyler scrolled through the flood of comments, he felt a dizzying mix of emotions. There was an outpouring of support from people of all backgrounds, praising his composure and eloquence. But interspersed with the positive messages were also vicious attacks and even thinly veiled threats. "You should have known your place, boy," read one particularly nasty comment that made Tyler's stomach churn. A knock on his door startled him. It was his roommate, Alex, looking concerned. "Hey man, you okay? There's a bunch of reporters outside the dorm asking for you." Tyler's heart raced. He peeked out the window to see a small crowd of journalists and curious onlookers gathered at the entrance of the building. "This is insane," Tyler whispered, more to himself than to Alex. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from his mother. "Tyler, baby, are you all right?" Her voice was thick with worry. "We saw the video. Your father and I are so proud of how you handled yourself, but we're worried about your safety." "I'm okay, Mom," Tyler assured her, even as his own uncertainty gnawed at him. I don't know how to handle all this attention." As if on cue, his phone beeped with an email notification. It was from the dean of the School of Journalism, requesting an immediate meeting. Tyler's mind raced. Would they support him? Or would they be concerned about the controversy affecting the school's reputation? Steeling himself, Tyler got dressed and prepared to face the day. As he stepped out of his dorm, the cacophony of shouted questions and camera flashes overwhelmed him. "Tyler, how does it feel to be the new face of the anti-racism movement? Do you plan to sue the restaurant? What's your message to other victims of discrimination?" Tyler pushed through the crowd, keeping his head down and refusing to comment. He felt like he was in a surreal dream or nightmare. Just yesterday, he was an ordinary student. Now, he was at the center of a national conversation about race and privilege. The meeting with the dean was tense. While she expressed support for Tyler's actions, there was an undercurrent of concern about the university's image. "We stand behind our students," she said carefully, "but we also need to consider the safety of our campus community. Perhaps it would be best if you took some time off until this blows over." Tyler felt a surge of disappointment. He had hoped for unequivocal support, not a suggestion to hide away. "With all due respect, Dean," he said, his voice steady, "I don't think this is something that should just blow over. This incident has sparked an important conversation. As a journalism student, isn't it my responsibility to contribute to that dialogue?" The dean's expression was unreadable. "Just be careful, Mr. Johnson. You're in uncharted waters now." As Tyler left the office, his phone buzzed with a new email. This one made his heart skip a beat. It was from Diane Foster, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist known for her hard-hitting investigative reports. "Mr. Johnson," the email read, "I was impressed by your poise in that video. If you're interested, I have an internship opening at my investigative journal. This could be an opportunity to channel this attention into meaningful change. Let's talk." Tyler's mind raced with possibilities. This could be his chance to make a real difference, to use his voice for something bigger than himself. But as he walked back to his dorm, the reality of his new situation hit him. Students whispered and pointed as he passed. Some offered words of support, while others glared disapprovingly. A notification popped up on his phone. Le Savoie's Yelp page was being flooded with negative reviews. People were calling for a boycott of the restaurant. While part of Tyler felt a grim satisfaction, another part of him wondered about the unintended consequences. What about the innocent staff who might lose their jobs? Back in his room, Tyler sat at his desk, staring at his laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank document, inviting him to share his story. But what should he say? How could he use this platform responsibly? As the day wore on, Tyler oscillated between exhilaration at the support he was receiving and paralyzing fear about the expectations now placed on him. His phone kept buzzing with interview requests from major news networks, offers for book deals, and invitations to speak at rallies. Just as he was feeling overwhelmed, a text came through from Sarah, his friend who was at the restaurant with him. "Hey, saw you on the news. Remember, you're still you. Don't let them change that. We're all here for you." Tyler smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for his friends. He took a deep breath and began to type, deciding to write an op-ed for the university paper. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey, one that would challenge him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. As night fell over the Columbia campus, Tyler looked out his window at the city lights. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irrevocably changed. For better or worse, he was now a voice in a national conversation. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, but instead of feeling crushed, he felt a growing determination. "All right, world," he whispered to himself, "let's see where this goes." Little did Tyler know that his journey was about to take him down a path of investigative journalism that would uncover truths far more shocking than he could have ever anticipated. The viral video was just the spark. The fire it would ignite was about to change not just Tyler's life, but the face of an entire city. The bustling newsroom of The Truth Seeker, Diane Foster's hard-hitting investigative journal, hummed with energy. Tyler Johnson, still adjusting to his newfound fame, sat at a small desk in the corner, surrounded by stacks of papers and a computer screen filled with open tabs. It had been 3 weeks since the incident at Le Sava, and Tyler's life had transformed into a whirlwind of interviews, public appearances, and now, his new internship. Diane, a formidable woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, approached Tyler's desk. "How's it going, kid? Found anything interesting yet?" Tyler looked up, his eyes bloodshot from hours of research. "I think so, Diane. The more I dig, the more I realize that what happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. There's a pattern here, and it's disturbing." Diane nodded, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. "Show me what you've got." Tyler pulled up a map of New York City on his screen, dotted with red markers. Each of these points represents a reported incident of racial discrimination in high-end establishments over the past year. Restaurants, clubs, boutiques, you name it. But here's the kicker. Most of these never made it to the media. They were either settled quietly or brushed under the rug. Diane leaned in, her interest piqued. "And how did you get this information?" "Social media mostly," Tyler explained. "After my video went viral, people started reaching out, sharing their own stories. I cross-referenced these with police reports and court filings. It's not comprehensive, but it's a start." "Good work, Johnson," Diane said, her tone impressed. "But remember, in this business, we need more than just anecdotes. We need hard evidence, paper trails, whistleblowers. Keep digging." As Diane walked away, Tyler's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Saw your story. I have information you might want. Meet me at Washington Square Park, 7 p.m. Come alone." Tyler's heart raced. Was this the break he'd been looking for? Or was he walking into trouble? After a moment's hesitation, he decided to go, but not before texting Sarah the details of the meeting, just in case. At 7 p.m. sharp, Tyler arrived at the park, his eyes scanning the crowds for any sign of his mysterious contact. A young woman with long dark hair approached him, her eyes darting nervously. "Are you Tyler?" she asked in a hushed tone. Tyler nodded, and the woman introduced herself as Sarah Martinez, a law student at NYU. "I've been following your story," she said. "I'm working with a nonprofit that provides legal aid to victims of discrimination. We've seen a spike in cases like yours, especially in certain neighborhoods." As they walked through the park, Sarah shared details of cases she'd been working on, stories of people being unfairly treated, denied service, or even physically removed from establishments due to their race or appearance. But here's what's really strange, she added, lowering her voice. Many of these incidents seem to be concentrated in areas slated for major development projects. Tyler's journalistic instincts kicked into high gear. You think there's a connection? Sarah shrugged. I don't know, but it's a hell of a coincidence. Look, I can't share specific case details, but I can point you in the right direction. Start with the Riverside Renewal Project. Something's not right there. As they parted ways, Tyler felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. He was onto something big, he could feel it, but he also couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into dangerous territory. Over the next few days, Tyler threw himself into researching the Riverside Renewal Project. He pored over public records, zoning laws, and city council meeting minutes. A pattern began to emerge, a series of incidents in local businesses followed by a sharp decline in property values, followed by buyouts by a handful of development companies. One name kept popping up: Grayson Enterprises. Tyler decided to dig deeper into the company's background. As he was leaving the office late one night, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The next morning, Tyler received an email from an anonymous source containing internal documents from Grayson Enterprises. The files hinted at a coordinated effort to drive out small businesses and longtime residents from target neighborhoods. Excited by the lead but wary of the source, Tyler showed the documents to Diane. Her face grew serious. This is big, Tyler, but it's also dangerous. If this is true, we're dealing with people who have a lot of money and influence. Are you sure you want to pursue this? Tyler thought about all the people who had reached out to him, sharing their stories of discrimination and injustice. He thought about his own experience at Luciva and how it had opened his eyes to a larger issue. I have to, he said firmly. This is bigger than me now. Diane nodded, a mix of pride and concern in her eyes. All right, but we do this by the book. Every fact triple-checked, every source verified. And Tyler, she added, her voice softening slightly, watch your back. As Tyler left Diane's office, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a student who had gone viral. He was a journalist on the verge of uncovering a story that could shake the foundations of New York City. That night, as he walked home, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. The black SUV was there again, parked a block away from his apartment. As he hurried inside, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, kid. You're in over your head. Instead of fear, Tyler felt a surge of determination. He was on the right track, and there was no turning back now. Little did he know that his investigation was about to uncover a conspiracy far more complex and far-reaching than he could have ever imagined. One that would put not just his career, but his life at risk. As he closed his apartment door behind him, Tyler took a deep breath. The real investigation was just beginning, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in his quest for the truth. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Tyler's cluttered apartment as he hunched over his laptop, eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers littered his desk, testament to the long hours he'd been putting into his investigation. As he scrolled through a seemingly endless stream of documents, a pattern was emerging that made his stomach churn. It wasn't just Grayson Enterprises. There was a web of companies, all connected through a complex network of shell corporations and offshore accounts. And behind it all, whispers of political connections that reached into the highest echelons of New York City government. A knock at the door made Tyler jump. He cautiously approached, peering through the peephole to see Sarah Martinez, the law student he'd met in Washington Square Park. Sorry for dropping by unannounced, Sarah said as Tyler let her in. But I couldn't risk saying this over the phone. I think someone's been following me. Tyler's heart raced. I've had the same feeling. There's this black SUV. Sarah nodded grimly. I've seen it too. Tyler, what have you gotten yourself into? Over the next hour, Tyler shared his findings with Sarah. Her eyes widened as she connected the dots with cases she'd been working on. This is huge. she whispered. "It's not just about discrimination. They're systematically pushing people out of entire neighborhoods." Tyler ran his hand through his hair, a habit he developed when stressed. "But why? Sure, there's money in gentrification, but this seems extreme." Sarah leaned in, her voice low. "I have a theory. Have you heard about the New York Revitalization Act?" Tyler shook his head. "It's a bill that's been quietly making its way through the state legislature. On the surface, it's about urban renewal. But buried in the fine print are clauses that would give unprecedented power to private developers in distressed areas." Tyler's mind raced. "And if these companies can manipulate which areas are considered distressed?" "Exactly," Sarah finished. "They'd have free rein to reshape entire sections of the city." As they continued to discuss their findings, Tyler's phone buzzed. It was an email from Carlisle Windsor, CEO of Lux Horizons, one of the city's most prestigious PR firms. "Mr. Johnson, your recent rise to prominence has caught our attention. We'd like to discuss an exciting opportunity. How would you like to be the face of our new diversity initiative? The compensation would be substantial." Tyler stared at the screen, a mix of emotions washing over him. The offer was tempting, more money than he'd ever imagined having. But something felt off. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noticing his expression. Tyler showed her the email. "Lux Horizons. Why does that name sound familiar?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Tyler, they're one of the companies I've been investigating. They've been handling PR for most of the developments in the affected neighborhoods." The realization hit Tyler like a punch to the gut. This wasn't an opportunity, it was an attempt to buy his silence. As if on cue, his phone rang. It was Diane Foster. "Tyler, where are you?" Her voice was urgent. "There's something you need to see." 20 minutes later, Tyler and Sarah were in Diane's office, watching a news report on the TV. "Breaking news," the anchor announced. "A fire has broken out at the offices of the Truth Seeker. While the cause is still unknown, sources suggest it may have been caused by faulty wiring." Diane muted the TV, her face grim. "This was no accident. Someone's sending us a message." Tyler felt a chill run down his spine. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a war. As they discussed their next steps, Tyler's phone buzzed again. Another email from Carlisle Windsor. "Mr. Johnson, I hope you're considering our offer. It would be a shame if your promising career were to be derailed by unfortunate circumstances. Why don't we meet to discuss this in person?" Tyler showed the email to Diane and Sarah. Diane's eyes narrowed. "This is it, Tyler. They're scared. We're close to something big." "But it's dangerous," Sarah interjected. "Maybe we should back off, go to the police." Tyler shook his head. "No, we've come too far to stop now. But we need to be smart about this." After a moment of tense silence, Diane spoke up. "I have an idea, but it's risky. Tyler, how do you feel about wearing a wire?" As they hatched their plan, Tyler felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. He was standing on the precipice of something monumental, a story that could change the face of New York City. But at what cost? Later that night, as Tyler walked home, the black SUV was there again. But this time, instead of fear, he felt a steely resolve. He was no longer just a student who had gone viral. He was a journalist on the verge of uncovering a conspiracy that reached into the heart of the city he loved. As he entered his apartment, Tyler's phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. "Watch your back, kid. Not everyone is who they seem." Tyler stared at the message, a chill running down his spine. The game was changing, and the stakes were higher than ever. But he was ready. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it no matter the cost. Little did Tyler know that his next move would uncover a truth so shocking. It would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his city, his story, and even his own past. The bustling cafe in downtown Manhattan buzzed with the typical morning crowd, but Tyler Johnson sat alone at a corner table, his hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. His eyes darted nervously around the room, looking for any sign of Carlisle Windsor. Under his shirt, the wire itched against his skin, a constant reminder of the dangerous game he was playing. Diane's words echoed in his mind. "Remember, Tyler, we need him to incriminate himself. Stay calm, and let him do the talking." A shadow fell across the table. Tyler looked up to see Carlisle Windsor, a tall man with silvering hair and a shark-like smile, sliding into the seat across from him. "Mr. Johnson," Windsor said smoothly, "I'm so glad you agreed to meet. I think we have much to discuss." As Windsor began to outline the opportunity he was offering, Tyler's mind raced. The man was careful with his words, never quite crossing the line into an explicit bribe or threat. Suddenly, Windsor's tone changed. "You know, Mr. Johnson, your mother Evelyn, isn't it? She works at Mercy Hospital, correct? It would be a shame if budget cuts forced them to lay off staff." Tyler's blood ran cold. This was no longer just about him. They were threatening his family. Before Tyler could respond, a commotion erupted near the cafe's entrance. A group of men in dark suits burst in, led by a familiar face, Frank, the ex-cop Tyler had briefly encountered during his investigation. "NYPD," Frank shouted, flashing a badge. "Carlisle Windsor, you're under arrest for conspiracy and attempted bribery of a journalist." As Windsor was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of shocked fury, Frank approached Tyler's table. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his gruff voice tinged with concern. Tyler nodded, still processing what had just happened. "How did you know?" Frank's expression darkened. "Let's just say I've been conducting my own investigation into Windsor and his cronies. When I heard about the fire at the Truth Seeker, I knew they were getting desperate. I've been keeping an eye on you." Back at the Truth Seeker's temporary office, Tyler, Diane, Sarah, and Frank gathered to debrief. "This is bigger than we thought," Frank explained, spreading out a series of documents on the table. "Windsor's just a cog in the machine. We're dealing with a network that includes corrupt politicians, real estate moguls, and even some bad apples in the police force." As they pored over Frank's evidence, a chilling picture emerged. The gentrification scheme was just the tip of the iceberg. There was a plan to reshape entire sections of New York City, displacing thousands of residents and small businesses in the process. "But why?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Why go to such extreme lengths?" Frank's expression was grim. "Money, power, and a twisted vision of progress. They believe they're building a better New York, one that caters to the elite while pushing out anyone they deem undesirable." As the group discussed their next steps, Tyler's phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. "Honey, are you okay? There are some men here asking about you. They say they're from the city planning office, but something doesn't feel right." Tyler's heart raced. He showed the message to the others. "They're panicking," Diane said, her voice tense. "Windsor's arrest has them scrambling. They're trying to find leverage. We need to move fast," Frank added. "Tyler, I hate to ask this, but how much do you know about your family's history in the city?" Tyler frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Frank hesitated, then pulled out an old photograph. It showed a younger version of Tyler's father standing in front of a small store in Harlem. "This was your family's business, wasn't it? Before it was forced to close down about 20 years ago." Tyler stared at the photo, a flood of childhood memories washing over him. "Yeah, my grandpa's store. Dad always said it was because of rising rents, but it was one of the first targets," Frank explained softly. The beginning of this whole scheme. The revelation hit Tyler like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a story he was covering. It was personal. His family, his community. They had been victims of this conspiracy for years without even knowing it. As the weight of this realization settled on him, Tyler felt a new determination rising within him. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was about justice for his family, for his community, for all the people who had been silenced and pushed aside. "So what do we do now?" Tyler asked, his voice steady with resolve. Diane leaned forward, her eyes blazing with the fire of a journalist on the verge of breaking the biggest story of her career. "We bring it all crashing down. Every corrupt official, every crooked deal, every dirty secret. We expose it all." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I can reach out to my contacts in the legal aid community. We'll gather testimonies, build a case. And I'll work my connections in the force," Frank added. "There are still good cops out there who'll want to help." As they formulated their plan, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. The story had grown beyond anything he could have imagined when he first stood up to discrimination in that restaurant. But with the growing stakes came growing danger. As they left the office that night, Frank pulled Tyler aside. "Watch your back, kid," he warned. "And be careful who you trust. In a story this big, everyone's got an angle." Tyler nodded, the weight of Frank's words settling on his shoulders. As he stepped out into the New York night, the city's lights twinkling like stars, Tyler knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The truth was within reach, but the path to it was fraught with danger. And somewhere out in the darkness, powerful forces were mobilizing against them, determined to keep their secrets buried at any cost. The fluorescent lights of the Truth Seekers' makeshift office buzzed incessantly as Tyler hunched over his laptop, his eyes burning from hours of staring at the screen. Empty coffee cups and half-eaten takeout containers littered his desk, testament to the long nights he'd been pulling. It had been 3 weeks since the confrontation with Carlisle Windsor, and Tyler felt like he was drowning in information. Every lead they followed seemed to uncover 10 more, each more shocking than the last. The conspiracy ran deeper than any of them had imagined, touching every aspect of city life. Sarah burst into the office, her face flushed with excitement. "Tyler, you're not going to believe this. I just got off the phone with a whistleblower from the city planning office. They're willing to talk." Tyler's heart raced. This could be the break they needed. But as he reached for his jacket, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Tyler, please call me. The university called. They're saying you haven't been to class in weeks. What's going on?" The message hit Tyler like a bucket of cold water. In his obsession with the story, he'd been neglecting everything else, his studies, his friends, even his family. The weight of what he was doing suddenly felt overwhelming. "You okay?" Sarah asked, noticing his expression. Tyler shook his head. "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if we're in over our heads. Maybe we should just hand everything over to the FBI and let them handle it." Sarah's eyes softened. "Hey, I get it. This is bigger than anything we ever imagined. But think about all the people counting on us, all the lives that have been affected. We can't back down now." As they made their way to meet the whistleblower, Tyler couldn't shake his unease. The city streets, once so familiar, now seemed full of hidden threats. Every passing car, every stranger's glance, felt like a potential danger. The meeting with the whistleblower, a nervous young woman named Jessica, took place in a quiet corner of Central Park. As she detailed the inner workings of the corruption within the city planning office, Tyler felt a mix of excitement and dread. This was the smoking gun they needed, but it also meant they were closer than ever to the heart of the conspiracy. Back at the office, Diane was waiting for them, her face grave. "Tyler, we need to talk. Your latest article. It's causing quite a stir." Tyler's piece, which exposed the connection between several high-profile development projects and a series of suspicious accidents in low-income neighborhoods, had been published that morning. The response had been immediate and fierce. "We're getting flooded with calls," Diane continued, "some offering more information, others not so friendly. The mayor's office has issued a statement calling your reporting irresponsible and unfounded." As if on cue, Tyler's phone rang. It was Richard, the manager from Le Sava, the restaurant where this had all started. "Mr. Johnson." Richard's voice was tense, almost frightened. I need to talk to you. There are things you need to know. About that night, about why I did what I did. Can we meet?" Tyler agreed, his mind racing. What could Richard possibly have to tell him? The meeting was set for that evening at a small diner in Queens. As Tyler waited, nursing a cup of coffee. He couldn't help but reflect on how much his life had changed in just a few short months. From a student celebrating his 21st birthday to a journalist at the center of a citywide scandal. Richard arrived, looking haggard and nervous. As he slid into the booth across from Tyler, he glanced around furtively before speaking. "Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. What happened that night at Le Sava? It wasn't just about racism. We were under pressure. The restaurant, the whole block, really, we were being squeezed. Told to create incidents to drive certain people away. I didn't want to, but they threatened my family, my livelihood." As Richard continued, laying bare the extent of the pressure and manipulation he'd faced, Tyler felt a mix of anger and pity. Richard was both a perpetrator and a victim, a small cog in a massive machine of corruption and greed. Their conversation was interrupted by the buzz of Tyler's phone. It was Frank, his voice urgent. "Kid, where are you? You need to get out of there now. They know about your meeting with the whistleblower. They're coming for you." Tyler's blood ran cold. He looked up to see two men in dark suits entering the diner, their eyes scanning the room. "Richard," Tyler whispered, "I need your help. Is there a back way out of here?" As Richard led him through the kitchen and out a service entrance, Tyler's mind raced. The danger was no longer theoretical. It was real, immediate, and closing in fast. In the alley behind the diner, Tyler paused to catch his breath. His phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Johnson. It's not too late to walk away. Consider this your final warning." As Tyler stared at the message, he felt a moment of doubt. Was it worth it? The risk to himself, to his family, to everyone involved? But then he thought of all the people whose lives had been upended by this conspiracy, of the communities torn apart, of the injustices that had gone unchallenged for too long. He thought of his own family's store, forced out of business years ago, a casualty of this grand scheme he was now unraveling. With a deep breath, Tyler made his decision. There was no turning back now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. As he disappeared into the New York night, Tyler knew that the real battle was just beginning. The forces arrayed against him were powerful, but he had something they didn't: the truth. And he was determined to let it shine, no matter how dark the path ahead might be. Little did Tyler know that his next move would uncover a truth so shocking. It would shake the very foundations of the city he called home, and force him to confront questions about justice, power, and the true meaning of courage. The early morning mist clung to the streets of New York as Tyler Johnson hurried through the city, his heart pounding. After narrowly escaping the men at the diner, he had spent the night moving from place to place, always looking over his shoulder. Now, as the sun began to rise, he was headed to what he hoped would be a safe haven, the offices of the truth seeker. As he rounded the corner, Tyler's heart sank. Police cars surrounded the building, their lights flashing in the dim morning light. For a moment, he feared the worst, but then he saw Diane Foster standing outside, her face grim but determined. "Tyler!" she called out when she saw him. "Thank God you're okay. We've been trying to reach you all night." "What's going on?" Tyler asked, eyeing the police warily. Diane's eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It's happening, Tyler. Everything's coming to a head. The police are here because we're about to blow this whole thing wide open." Inside, the office was a hive of activity. Sarah and Frank were there, along with a team of lawyers and what looked like federal agents. On every screen, Tyler could see drafts of articles, legal documents, and evidence files. "Kid, you made it," Frank said, clapping Tyler on the shoulder. "We were worried when you went off the grid last night." "What do you mean it's all coming to a head?" Tyler asked, still trying to catch up. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes shining. "After your article yesterday, we were flooded with tips and testimonies. It was like a dam breaking. People who had been afraid to speak out for years suddenly found their courage. And that's not all," Frank added. "Your story caught the attention of the FBI. They've been running their own investigation into corruption in the city, and our evidence was the missing piece they needed. Tyler's head spun as they briefed him on everything that had happened overnight. The pieces were all falling into place: the gentrification scheme, the political corruption, the corporate manipulation. It was bigger than any of them had imagined, reaching into the highest levels of city government and some of the most powerful corporations in the country. "So what happens now?" Tyler asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Diane stepped forward, her face serious. "Now we publish everything, all at once. No more drip-feeding information. We lay it all out for the world to see." As the team worked feverishly to prepare their exposé, Tyler found himself at the center of a whirlwind. He was writing, editing, fact-checking, all while coordinating with Sarah, Frank, and the legal team to ensure every claim was rock solid. Hours blended together as they raced against the clock. They knew that once they started publishing, the backlash would be swift and fierce. They had to get everything right. Finally, as the sun began to set on what felt like the longest day of Tyler's life, Diane gathered everyone around. "This is it, people," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "What we do today will change this city forever. Are we ready?" A chorus of determined yes filled the room. Tyler looked around at the faces of his colleagues, tired, scared, but resolute. They had all risked so much to get to this point. With a deep breath, Diane turned to Tyler. "You started this, kid. You should be the one to finish it. Hit the button." Tyler's hand hovered over the keyboard, his finger poised above the enter key. In this moment, he thought about everything that had led him here: the incident at the restaurant, the long nights of investigation, the threats, the close calls. He thought about his family, about all the families who had been hurt by this corruption. With a silent prayer, he pressed the key. Within minutes, social media exploded. The Truth Seeker's website crashed under the weight of traffic. Every major news outlet in the city, then the country, picked up the story. As the night wore on, reports started coming in. Arrests were being made. Emergency sessions of the city council were called. Protests erupted outside City Hall and the offices of implicated corporations. In the midst of the chaos, Tyler's phone rang. It was his mother. "Tyler," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We just saw the news. Your father, he's crying. He says he finally understands why we lost the store all those years ago. You've done something incredible, baby." As the sun rose on a new day in New York City, Tyler stood at the window of the Truth Seeker's office, watching the city wake up to a changed reality. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be legal battles, threats, and attempts to discredit their work. But for the first time in months, Tyler felt a sense of peace. The truth was out there now for all to see. And in that truth, there was hope for justice, for change, for a better future. As he turned back to his colleagues, ready to face whatever came next, Tyler knew that this was just the beginning. The story of New York's rebirth was only just starting, and he was ready to tell it, one truth at a time. Little did Tyler know that the biggest challenge and the most profound revelation was yet to come. The final chapter of this saga would test not just his journalistic skills, but his understanding of justice, forgiveness, and the true meaning of community. The warm summer breeze carried the sounds of laughter and conversation through the open windows of what was once Le Sava. The once exclusive restaurant had been transformed into a vibrant community center, its walls now adorned with colorful murals depicting the diverse faces of New York City. Tyler Johnson stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces before him. It had been a year since the publication of their exposé, a year of trials, tribulations, and profound change for the city he loved. "A year ago," Tyler began, his voice steady and clear, "I stood in this very spot, not as a welcome guest, but as someone told he didn't belong. Today, we gather here not just as individuals, but as a community united in its diversity and strength." The crowd, a mix of longtime residents, community leaders, and even some former adversaries, listened intently. Among them, Tyler spotted familiar faces: Sarah, Frank, Diane, his parents, and even Richard, the former manager of Le Sava. The truth we uncovered shook this city to its core, Tyler continued. We saw corruption toppled, injustices addressed, and a system that favored the few begin to crumble. But the real story, the one that truly matters, is what came after. Tyler paused, remembering the tumultuous months that followed their revelation. The legal battles, the resistance from those who stood to lose power, the threats that continued even as arrests were made and indictments handed down. We faced opposition, yes, but we also witnessed something remarkable. People from all walks of life, from every corner of this great city, came together. They demanded change, not just in laws and policies, but in hearts and minds. He gestured to the community center around them. This place stands as a testament to that change. Where once stood a symbol of exclusion, we now have a space that welcomes all, that celebrates our differences and our common humanity. Tyler's voice softened as he approached the most challenging part of his speech. But our journey taught us something else, something perhaps even more important than exposing corruption. We learned about the power of redemption, of second chances. He looked directly at Richard, who nodded solemnly. Some of those who were part of the old system have become our strongest allies in building a new one. They remind us that change is possible, that it's never too late to choose a different path. As Tyler concluded his speech, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The past year had been a whirlwind of journalism awards, speaking engagements, and continued investigations. But this moment, standing here in this transformed space, felt like the true culmination of their efforts. After the ceremony, as people mingled and explored the new community center, Tyler found a quiet moment with Diane. "So, kid," she said, a proud smile on her face. "What's next for New York's rising star journalist?" Tyler laughed, shaking his head. "Honestly, I'm thinking of going back to school, finishing my degree, then maybe start a nonprofit focused on community journalism. There are still so many stories out there that need to be told." Diane nodded approvingly. "Whatever you do, Tyler, you've already made a difference. Don't ever forget that." As the evening wound down, Tyler stood outside the community center, looking out at the city skyline. New York had changed, yes, but its spirit, resilient, diverse, ever-evolving, remained. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a young student facing discrimination to a journalist who helped reshape his city. He thought about the lessons learned, the bonds forged, and the challenges still to come. A group of young kids ran past him, laughing as they chased each other on the sidewalk. Their joy, their freedom to simply be children in this space, struck Tyler profoundly. This was what it was all about, creating a city, a world, where everyone had the chance to thrive. As he turned to go back inside, ready to continue the work of building this new community, Tyler felt a renewed sense of purpose. The story of New York's transformation was far from over, and he was committed to being part of it, one truth, one act of justice, one moment of connection at a time. The truth had indeed set them free, but it was what they chose to do with that freedom that would define their future. And for Tyler Johnson, the future looked brighter than ever. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button below and join our community. Based on your interests, we've picked this story for you that's showing on your screen right now. Click to watch it now. We're sure you'll love it. See you next time.